There's some images of the guys on stage. You know, there's moments that people don't see where, you know, a hand goes onto a shoulder as a gesture of comfort or friendship. I've caught a bunch of those that are really special because I know the meaning underneath them, the friendship that, for example, Paul and Gord had, and the things that they went through together. Those are really special. There's a couple pictures of kisses that are really special. Every day, before the show, he'd kiss everybody right behind stage, backstage before he went on show. And seeing those, it was just, you know, just being there was almost overpowering at times. Like, you get a hug from Gord on that tour, and you'd remember it forever.
While you might not know his name, you've definitely seen his work. David Bastedo was the man behind the camera lens, chronicling the career of Canada's most beloved band, the Tragically Hip. David also photographed the band's farewell tour after it was announced that lead singer Gord Downie had a terminal brain tumor. His photos were the ones you saw in the newspapers, on TV, on social media. I got to talk with David about that final tour with the band, his philosophy of hard work, and much more. This is my conversation with David Bastedo. Well, thanks very much for making the time to chat with me. I know you're a pretty busy guy. I noticed on your Twitter bio, one of the things you describe yourself as is a digital gardener, and that term had me kind of curious. I don't know, is that two things or is that one thing, and how would you describe what that is?
Well, my background is in digital, so I have 20 plus years of digital media and communications. I'm a programmer. I've done large data analysis. I have a patent pending in large data analysis down to brand persona using social media data. And I'm really a prototyper, so I build things, and I really like to garden. So I kind of coined the two things. I have a vegetable garden.
Oh, nice. So those are, you just smushed the two things together. Okay.
Yeah, and so one of the things I've been doing this year is growing vegetables and putting sensors in my garden.
Oh, so you're actually a digital gardener. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I have and I do like woodworking. So I built, it's on my desk right now. Should send you a picture. I built an apartment building, a 4-story apartment building out of plywood. And I used to draw these buildings since I was a kid in cartoon. I thought I'd build one. And then I've put weather sensors in it and RGB lights. So the notion is that it will react to sound in my garden.
That's amazing. Yeah, send a picture and I'll throw it in the show notes after as well.
My desk is like a complete, my wife calls it the mad scientist, like wires and sensors. And that's partly what I've been doing this summer. So I learn by doing. So I dive into these things and I just get completely engrossed. And to me, this is, I used to program like kids games or online games. And so this is programming, but you get a physical reaction.
Right.
So I really like it. So my ultimate goal is to build a bubble machine with a sensor that you walk by, the lid lifts, the bubble machine, which I'll build, kind of comes up and a wall of bubbles will be released.
I think that sounds like a hit.
Yeah, right?
My kids would like it anyway, for sure.
So part of the goal was, and I'm not going to accomplish it on this one, but was to have the bubble machine in the top of the building and the roof would rise and then bubbles would be released. So I had my first bubble party this summer. I had 30 people. I'm on an island just off Kingston.
Oh, yeah.
I had 30 people in my garden at the beginning of the summer with bubbles.
Bubbles for everyone.
We drank wine and looked at bubbles. So I've hooked my garden up with lights and stuff.
You sound like an interesting dude to hang around with, I have to say. So everyone in Canada, certainly, and you know, a lot of people around the world would be familiar with your work, certainly, especially over the past couple of years. And I guess specifically in the way that I became aware of you was with your work with the Tragically Hip. I have a lot of questions about that, but the first one is how did you fall into that group? Were you friends with these guys? Like how did you fall into that orbit?
That's one of those stories. I'm just trying to give you the easy one.
Mm.
So I do one of the things I've been working on, you may or might not know, is I do a full talk on this topic
I do,
right now.
yeah. You have one on, it's October 26th, I think, right?
Yeah, one in October and one in Kingston in December 13th, which will be really special as I have live music being incorporated, which I'll get to. But really, when I was in high school, a friend of mine went out with a girl who had a sister who had a boyfriend who was in a band. And I met this guy, and he lent me his pants to go see a show, and the guy turned out to be Gord Downey, and that was my first Hip show. That's the short answer.
Right.
And then my wife went to Queens, sort of, and on her first day of school, she met Patrick Downey.
Oh, wow. His brother.
Brother, yeah. And another guy named Steve Middlebrook, and they've all been really great friends since they were 18 or 19. And maybe 15 years, 12 years after I first met Gord, I met this woman who became my wife. And through those connections, I met a whole bunch of people. And one of them was Bernie Breen, who became their manager. Another one was Paul Langlois, who's a dear friend of ours. And I was working in digital, and I started working with Hugh Dillon, who was my first music client. And eventually the Hip asked me to work with him.
I got to ask about the pants. Why are you borrowing pants from Gord Downey?
Oh, so interesting. I just gone out to Victoria, and I was 18 or probably 18, and they had a dress code at the bar, and I had holes in my jeans, and nobody told me.
Okay.
Got there, and they wouldn't let me in. So this is before cell phones. So Derek gets in touch with his girlfriend, who gets in touch with the sister, who gets in touch with the boyfriend, who invites us up. And then I have to ask him to borrow his pants so I can go see him. And he lent me his fucking pants.
So these are extra pants, or are these the pants he was wearing?
No,
or?
he just had a pair of jeans in his hotel room.
Right.
I'm not a tall guy, so I wore his jeans over top of my jeans and had them rolled up about a foot.
And so you don't even know him at this point?
Never met him before in my life.
So that's a new version of the giving someone the shirt off their back. It's giving them their pants out of their hotel room.
Yeah.
What year was that? Do you remember approximately?
It would have been 1988 or 89.
So that's when they were just kind of getting rolling.
When they were getting rolling. They were playing in a bar in Victoria, and it was the first time I'd seen them.
So I remember the first time I ever saw the Hip. It was by accident. I was at Western, and I was in the campus bar, The Spoke, that night, and there was a cover charge for the first time. I'm like, what the hell is this? So they're charging us like $5 to get in or whatever. And then
a lot at the time, right? You're like, what band's worth $5?
Exactly. And they were on stage, and I think it was Up to Here that had just come out, and the place was packed, and you really got the sense like, holy shit, this is big. Like there's something happening here. And obviously they just continued to explode. And I had never been exposed to them. So that was the first time that I'd seen them. So I'm interested in the photography element, because it sounds like when you got involved with them, it was more on, if I'm right, was it on the kind of like the website and the digital side?
Yeah, exactly. So I got hired to do their website. And what I'd done, I'm into digital and strategy, and I did a residency at the Canadian Film Centre New Media in the late 90s. I'd written we'll call it a 21-page strategy paper on the future of music and digital and how they would come together and what was required to move ahead in that. And I gave it to the guys. I kind of plopped it down. And it was a content-based strategy, really, and fans, and it was about re-engaging their fans. They'd been off. They had were just going through your favorites. Right. So the box set was just about to come out. They didn't really have a lot of new material, and I had this idea that if I could give a lens into the band and people could see and experience the band through my experience, that it would be really engaging. And Gordon and I talked a lot about it, and we sort of did that. So they let me, and I basically spent all the money I had on gear that they gave me on gear. Right. And and started documenting them. And then they take me places, and kind of I was always there.
So is that how you learned how to shoot? And I have some technical
No,
questions as well.
no.
Like,
So I had a dark room growing up,
yeah.
and then I was in grade 8. I was 13 years old. I was at a school where we had to, what they called options. We had to pick an option to learn. I chose photography. I learned how to make images and develop black and white pictures. And my parents, I was a kind of a troubled kid. My parents gave me a dark room to try and keep me out of trouble.
Was there a lock on the outside of it?
No, but I spent my youth more or less smoking dope, and playing pool was my other thing that I ended up doing, and making pictures.
And one of those turned into a career.
Yeah, right. So, and then what happened is analog and digital kind of converged. So I stopped taking pictures. And when the hip came around, digital had just started to catch up and became affordable-ish. And so I had a cheap digital camera, and then I spent money and got back into it. So really my photography started again with the hip as a result of the hip.
So there's a quote from you about the final tour a couple summers ago, and here it is. It was the best and it was the worst because of the situation with Gord's health and the fact that I had spent so many years with them. They're pretty much family. I cried every day for the first 2 weeks. I lost 15 pounds in stress and in running up and down the stadiums, but at times it was also the absolute best.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time dealing with hip fans as part of the digital job of my life. I met people from all over the country, and to see the response, to understand what people were going through, it was just on that side of it so spectacularly special to experience it and to walk through. And there was always a story, always a reference to a time frame or a point in their lives. And everybody had that common connection, and music is what did this. And then to know what Gord was going through and had been through, and the choices that he made, there's not much you can say to somebody about that. And in many ways, we were just in awe that he chose to do that and spent the time and energy and was able to do it. It was really just so special on one side and so unbelievably unselfish on the other side, or not. I don't know. But walking those hallways and seeing the guys on one side and seeing the fans on the other, and seeing all the emotions and the feelings was very special and overwhelming at times.
So as that's happening, are you, like, you probably have arguably the most interesting spot in the world, but because you're between the band and the public, and are there any points where you're in the middle of a show or they're getting ready to go on stage and you're thinking, holy shit, like, so many people would kill to be in this spot?
My entire career. That is exactly how I felt about it. And I talk about it, and there was a frame of reference in my career early where that really came to light, and where it really affected me. And it was a time in the Bastedo studio, the first time I'd ever seen the hip and just myself play a hip song. When I started, they were working on some new material, so I'd seen new songs, and I'd seen some. They were doing background tracks for videos and stuff, and then they had a show for Live 8 coming up. And they invited me to the bathhouse, which was probably the second or third time I'd been there. And we were just talking in the room, the control room, and Gord Sinclair said, well, should we play? And all the guys got up, and we walked across the hallway, and I followed them, and they sat down and started to tune. And I think they went into, it was Courage, and then they played Music at Work. And all I could think about was how lucky I was and how many people would want to be me. And that never left. And I always wanted, it really framed the rest of my work retrospectively. And I didn't really start thinking about it till maybe last year, but really those feelings and specialness and uniqueness of the position motivated me in terms of my work, just because I knew so many people would want to be there, and it was so special that I wanted to show that in my work and have it reflect. So I looked for those personal moments that I think only I maybe could understand just from being around. And it was subconscious, I think.
So there's so many shots that you took all the shots basically, and the ones that you would see in the magazines, and the one you'd see in the papers, and the one you'd see on the National, like your name's attached to all of those. And
Yeah.
a lot of those shots are like just goosebump shots and amazing. Like, I could probably spend 4 months trying to take the shot. Like you took that shot of Gord Downie and Justin Trudeau kind of embracing. The lighting, the framing, like, I'm kind of a weekend photographer, but like, oh my God, that photo is amazing. Please tell me you took about 50 shots to make that work. Like that just give me some hope.
There's a good story about that one too. So, Gord, the way the dressing room, if you can imagine the dressing room was U-shaped, and at the top of each U there was a door. So there was a left side and a right side. Mm-hmm. And beside the right side door, there was another room, which was the room where Gord was getting his back. He'd get massages and stuff before a show. And the Prime Minister showed up early to the assigned time. And so Gord came out of the room to find out that the Prime Minister was on his way. And Gord has got shorts on and is holding his pants. And so the Prime Minister comes, and there's security, and there's a camera crew. Nick DePonsier was there. And so I go in with Adam Scotty, the Prime Minister's photographer, and then everybody comes in following us. The last person who comes in is the documentary crew, and they have a light shining right at us. And Adam and I are looking at one another and going, this is just not going to work. There's like 50 people in the room. It's maybe not 50, but, it's really tight. And so I made a last-minute decision to leave the room, and I ran out the other U because we were top and out the door, and I ducked under all the RCMP officers and came in the other door and literally ducked under everybody and came to a rest just as they were coming in for the hug against a floor lamp. And I thought was attached to the floor, and it wasn't, and it made this big racket right when they were going in for the hug. And I remember the big RCMP officer looked at me, and I just went click, 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 and right over my left shoulder, it turns out Adam had followed 2 steps behind me. So all those pictures, he's like 2 steps behind me. Yeah. He got all the same pictures, but they're slightly different angles. Jeez. And it was really about that decision to risk leaving the room to come to the other side. And the picture is what it was. It was really more about the decision, and then I just clicked.
When you see a shot like that, and I'm not, that to me, that's just one of the many that stands out. But when you look at that,
thank you.
What do you think? Like, when you reflect on that moment and the decision and everything else, like, what do you think?
When I look at the picture afterwards?
Yeah, when you have it, I'm sure you've got it framed somewhere.
My regret, I have one regret with that picture, that I was not able to get it signed by the Prime Minister before Gord died.
Right.
Is the one thing. I look at these pictures, and sometimes I don't even know how they happen. I mean, I know how they happen, but listen, I'm not really. I'm not the most confident person in my imagery, to be honest.
Wow.
I always self-doubt and question myself, and I never know if my images are any good.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right.
But I guess at the same time, that's one of the things that keeps people improving, right?
I think so. I think that, I'm driven by self-doubt. And one of the things I'm driven by wanting to do something different and experience. I'm experience driven. I would rather have experience than money, for example.
Right.
Not that money's not important, but it's not what drives me and motivates me.
Has the Prime Minister signed the photo yet?
No, and I'm working on it. So what I did is I made 7 copies of the photo, and I I took them to Gord's house, and I had him sign 6 of them.
What are you going to do with them?
Interestingly, I told him what I was going to do with them. I have one for the band. I have one for the management team. I have one for myself. I have one for the Prime Minister. I have one for the National Archives if they'll take them. And then I got one more. And Gord signed 6 of them, personalized them. And I just need the Prime Minister to sign the other 6.
Well, maybe he's listening. I doubt it.
Yeah, I had it all set up, but I would have had to mail them. I didn't really want to mail them, and I'm in touch with Adam, but I wanted it to be kind of special. And I make like little certificates in the form of laminate. So I had laminates made up for them. So they're all sitting, sealed, signed. I got the pens that Gord signed them with in the box, and I'm just kind of waiting. And once they're signed, I will. I don't know what I'm going to do with them.
Sounds like an auction possibility. You never know.
No, those ones I'll never auction. No, I'm not. No, those ones are really personal.
Okay.
Yeah, there's. If he wants to auction his, he can auction it, but I'm not auctioning mine. That goes into my archives.
If I had one of those, I'd keep it forever.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that I did over the time, when I started, because I wasn't really a photographer, I would take my work over to Gord's. Gord and I would have coffee at his house semi-regularly, especially in the beginning. And I would take my work over, I get it printed at the time, and show him. And over the time, he came to appreciate my photography. But as I showed him, I got him to sign images. So I have a collection of signed images that he's written messages on every single one to me.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So the technical aspect of your photography, one of the things I noticed is that it looks from the shots, and you alluded to this in the one where with the Prime Minister, where you had to leave the room and come in another door and pop up just to get the shot. And that, partly is experience and instinct and all those other things. But like looking at the shots from any particular show, it looks like about 9 people were taking those. So you've got to be running all over the place. There's shots from behind, there's shots from above, there's shots from the side, there's shots in front.
I spend my entire show moving.
And now, is that planned in advance? Do you have a bit of a strategy, or do you kind of just improvise in the moment?
Totally improvise in the moment. I look at the set list, and hey, if there's Bob Cajun on that tour, I know that the phones and lighters are going to come out, and I want a shot of the whole arena lit up. So right. I got to go to the top. But on that tour, I had an assistant. And so I was shooting film as well for CBC. Mm-hmm. So I had a whole bunch of roles. So and they provided an assistant, and I turned my assistant into a photographer. So his role was supposed to be follow me around and hand me shit, and right. then take my video cards and deal with my video cards. I didn't really like that idea.
Yeah.
And we chatted, and I like, do you have a camera? And his name was Mike Homer, and he said, yes. I said, do you shoot? And he said, sort of. And I said, okay, bring your camera. And I turned him into a photographer, and he and I covered the final show in Kingston, but he shot every show as well. And so what we kind of, I was the guy in the pit. I didn't let him into the pit at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I'd let him into the pit a little bit. But he covered sort of the wide and the far back.
Yeah. And
then I was sort of assigned to Gord and the band.
Right.
That's sort of how we split it up. But we'd wander around because I'd be filming, and I'd run into him in, random aisles or sections. And I ran into people I knew randomly as I walked around every night.
And people are trying to chat with you, and you're like, hey, I'm kind of busy here.
Exactly.
So, what would be your biggest tip for concert photography? The lighting is a nightmare at these shows. It's unpredictable. It's like, and I've tried to do that before, and the pictures look like garbage, and it makes me sad. What would be some of your top couple of tips for the average photographer?
For concert photography?
Yeah, for concerts.
Oh, there's a couple aspects of it. I'd put the gear aside because you can work with whatever gear one has. You don't. I mean, it's easier if you have fast lenses, but not everybody does, and not everybody can. You just really have to look for the moments and timing, and know what you're after in many ways. Practice. It's like anything else. It's not the easiest thing to do. People think that being a concert photographer is kind of easy because you're just taking pictures of music, but it's really not. And I think there's some really great photographers, but they're not as many really, really great concert photographers personally, and everybody has their different style. When you see a black and white image at a concert, it's mostly, not always, but mostly because the photographer's blown out all the lighting.
Right.
So they turn it black and white, or it's super saturated pink or blue, and they don't like it, so they take all the color out.
Right.
And I always thought it was a bit of a cop-out. There's about 2 photographers, maybe 3 that I know of, who shoot black and white really well. And one of them's a guy in Australia, Jazz Meadows, for example. Shoots black and white all the time, and his stuff's just beautiful. For like a big stadium, I mean, you have to be in the pit or get access. Access is part of the issue.
Sure.
Right? So how to get access. I've really only worked with bands and management teams. That's sort of, I usually either ask or get invited. If there's a show I want or something, I sometimes ask. But I don't really like to pull those strings too often.
Are there other bands reaching out to you now? Because I know you've worked with like the Trews and Sam Roberts and stuff like that in the past, but are other bands kind of or management teams asking for you to work with them now? Or
you would think, but not really.
Jeez.
It's like I have to. I don't know. It seems like I'm chasing some of these people down. I'm trying to get on a tour right now, in the hoops I have to go through. I don't know. A lot of people will do it for cheap, and I won't. For example,
you get what you pay for, I guess, right?
You get what you pay for, and I'll show up if I like a band. I will do it for free because I like the people and I like music and I want to learn the band, but I won't do that forever. There's a couple new bands that I've been sort of working with. One out of Hamilton called The Elevator, who I really love. I love I call them the kids. I love the kids and I love their music, and I've seen them a bunch of times and they're getting better all the time, and I really can't wait to see them in a year. A buddy of mine manages a band called the Kents out of Lindsay that I was out east with randomly and ran into, and spent a day with them and took some portraits of them and saw one of their shows, and they kind of blew me away. Yeah, there's just, a lot of bands can't afford a touring photographer either. You have to be sort of at a certain level,
Sure.
And you have to decide that it's worth your while. Right? And that's a content thing, and content in this day and age, I think, is really important. But it's almost sometimes more than a one-man job too.
There's another quote from you, and it was on the idea of hard work. I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours working. I've missed all sorts of things in my life. I've spent countless hours late at night just hitting my head against the wall trying to figure things out. I think that's one of the underrated elements for people who, and I don't want to pick on millennials because I think this is just across society, but people think, for example, photography, I can just pick up a camera and I'm going to be a superstar. Talk about the role of work in your career.
I always thought, not that I was dumb, but I didn't know a lot. My father's sort of overeducated. He has a PhD and a law degree, which he got concurrently in 2 different countries while he taught law, and then started a law firm. And I grew up in a house where being smart was kind of taken for granted, I guess. It was like words and arguments at the dinner table and manners, and I don't know, it probably made me question myself a little bit, but it also made me follow my parents instilled in me a discipline of not really taking no in terms of understanding and learning, and that learning was self-driven. And I just followed my passions. They probably wanted me to be something other than I am, but my mother was a stockbroker, and I did my securities test at one time, and I got 3/4 of the way through, and I said, no fucking way. And that's my life. Really, I got into film and television. I wrote a Bible for an interactive educational children's television series in 1996, I think. And I ended up going to the Canadian Film Center and got interested in computers. And computers was one of those things where you had to spend time to learn, and you had to do it on your own. And then the internet was invented. Right? And then all of a sudden you could look things up, and YouTube is one of the craziest inventions ever. Like, I don't watch videos about, I don't know, I watch videos about how to make things, and, you know, I watch videos about someone taking you on a tour of their garden where they've taken their rainwater and filtered it and turned it into something.
Right.
Like, I love to learn how people do things, and I love to do things with my hands and my mind. And my mind is kind of active all the time. Like, photography is probably my second or third thing if I thought about it. And now I'm trying to turn it into my first thing. But so there was always something, and I don't know, I just always felt like I was dumb and wanted to learn more. And I lost myself in these activities. I call, you know, the programming ones I call computer masturbation. And you know, you just read this stuff and you're trying to understand it, and it doesn't work, and you're like, what the fuck? And then you find out it's a friggin' comma or something, right? You know, and that's experience, and I think I've taken that approach to a lot of these things. You know, I've spent hours and hours and hours editing my images this past couple of years, just going through 12 years of images, and you know, even that's a challenge emotionally and physically, and you know, again, like, looking at your images, I always think, oh fuck, are these any good?
Really? Wow.
Still, I always think that there are other people who could do it or do it better. I don't know. I'm not a very technical photographer, I don't think.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, just my exposure is never perfect, and you know, I can't take pictures the way other people take pictures. I don't know. And by the time I process them, I like my pictures a little gritty for whatever reason. I think it's from the black and white stock I grew up using, ASA 400, Kodak Tri-X Ilford, and Ilford paper. It just had this sort of grittiness to it. You know, it was a little pixelated, and I don't like everything glossy. I don't really touch up a lot of my work at all. I try not to crop it.
Right.
I generally frame in my camera.
What's your, are you a Canon guy, a Nikon guy?
Canon.
You're Canon?
But only because that's what I started on.
Right.
And I've never shot a Nikon ever in my life. Maybe once. I think my friend let me press the button once.
What do you use for, you've got to have, you know, hundreds of thousands of images. What do you use for storage and organization? Because there's just a dog's breakfast of tools out there.
The bane of my existence. I use external hard drives, a safety deposit box, and Lightroom.
Lightroom.
Yeah.
And how much sort of editing or kind of post-production do you do on your photos? You talked about editing them. I'm like, what does that mean for you?
Generally, not every case. I generally only do to my photos what I could do in a darkroom.
Right.
Using Lightroom. I very rarely clone, or, you know, I don't like airbrushing. I don't airbrush people. You know, if I'm shooting somebody's wedding, I might take a blemish off or something, but that's tends to be as far as I go.
Right.
I'll make things blacker. I'll get rid of an audience and just make it black, that kind of thing. But I tweak the contrast and the levels and sometimes the color, but really I don't do a whole lot on top of that. And then what I tend to do is the night that I shoot, I go back and I download my images. And if I'm on a tour or something, then I have to pick selects for, kind of quickly. But I tend to relive the entire concert after the show, going through all the images and editing quickly. And then sometimes I will not come back to them for months. And sometimes I'll come back to them the next day or weeks, or sometimes I haven't gone back to them. And one of the things is I constantly kind of go back through my archive randomly out of order, looking for things that I've missed.
Right.
Because your eye really changes. Mm-hmm. Like, I've found images of Gord, for example, that are stunning, that I've never seen before in my life, that I took.
You must have thousands of images that many thousands that no one's ever seen.
I'm pretty sure I took 23,000 images on the Man Machine Poem Tour.
Wow.
My assistant took about 20,000. Mike, I have his hard drive. I've opened it once and I closed it.
Oh, man.
I couldn't even go through it. So I have, yes, I would say people have seen about 1%. I don't even know, 1%. I have no idea. Like, I have hard drives and hard drives and hard drives filled with images.
If you ever want to do a screening, let me know. I'll bring a bottle of scotch over and we can check out some images.
You're not the first person to have asked me that, to come over to my house and just let me take them through photos.
Yeah.
And I'm not against that, really. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Keep me posted.
Yeah, and what I started doing is printing images. So I'm trying to print out, not my entire archive, that would be ridiculous, but yeah. I'm trying to print out hundreds and hundreds of the keepers. Because I'm afraid in this day and age, technology is one of those things, right? Assets are disappearing.
They disappear, yeah.
Our cultural history is disappearing, really, and people don't realize the artifacts of who we are and who we have been in our families and the lessons that we've learned disappearing. Because we don't have these physical attributes that we pass on to one another anymore, like an image or a card or a letter, so I'm afraid of these assets disappearing. And after Gord died and before Gord died, I was conscious of it. I've kept all my technology over 18 years, I would think, almost every hard drive, every cable, so I could access things. And I've spent a year and a half trying to put them into one place.
Right. What do you use for printing? Do you print them yourself?
I do everything myself. I have two printers at home. I have Epson 3800 and I have Epson P5000. The P5000 is a bit of a beast. It does 17 by 22 in rolls. That's the machine I use. I sell my images and it prints I think it's 11 or 12 different inks. It's taken me a long time to learn to use it properly.
You could probably open up your own print shop with that thing. Jeez.
Well, I have, and I keep all my disc cards too, and I cut the corners off them. I have hundreds. I've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on paper and ink over the last couple of years, in particular. And because I wanted to print this out, and one of my goals is to have 180 framed images of the hip in 1 or 2 rooms.
Oh, amazing.
About 30 to 40 images of each guy and groups, and that gets me to about 180. And that's really just a motivation. I think the power of the images is in the archive altogether, and seeing them all together as a band. You can easily pull out, images of Gord and set Gord aside, but that's not the hip, that's Gord.
Right.
And, as much as they tried, they never really were as successful apart as they were together. And it's the power of family and the power of who they were as a group that makes them special.
Do you have like I made it to two of the shows. I was at the second one in Toronto, and I was at the one in Hamilton 2 days later.
Yeah.
And I felt very lucky to be at those two. I can't even imagine being at all of them. And what I found interesting is even though it's the same band and basically similar-ish set list, they were all a little bit different. I was really blown away with how different the feel was of each show. Not like
Yeah.
one was better than another, just different.
Everything was different.
Did you have, of all the shows, did you have one that's kind of your favorite?
It wasn't the last one. That was my worst.
Why was that? Why was that the worst?
Uh, there were technical issues for me. We had decided, the management team had decided that there were a lot of equipment on the floor and a lot of TV and cables and whatever. And just because of the importance of the show and the lack of room, it would have been dangerous to have a pit filled with photographers. I almost got knocked out that night by a TV camera, actually.
Really?
Yeah, like literally almost knocked out. So they decided that myself and my assistant Mike would do all the photos. And they wanted them delivered kind of in real time.
Wow.
So we had a third person on the social media team who was helping me, and it just didn't quite work out the way I had anticipated. Partly in editing, like I've realized that no one can edit the same way I edit my own images.
Right.
As one thing, and then I got new cards, and the cards weren't reading in the reader. Yeah. So I missed a third of the show trying to deliver pictures for press.
Oh man. So what show was your favorite, do you think?
Maybe, I don't know. I think Calgary was really, this is the way the audiences react were different. Calgary, I think, if I recall correctly, was sort of the most boisterous.
Really?
Crowd, if I recall. Or it might have been Winnipeg, one of the two.
And that was one of the first shows because they came across from west to east.
They went to Victoria and then Vancouver and then up Edmonton and then Calgary and then Winnipeg. And one of the most special things was seeing Gord for the first time right before the Victoria show, the first show. I hadn't seen him yet, and I'd arranged to have a meet and greet with him, as I call him, just before the show. And, there's arrangements to be made. It was all really locked down because of health, and nobody knew what was going to happen. So anyways, he had a separate dressing room the first night because I don't know why. It was just the way he dressed right beside where his stage clothes were. And it was the first time he'd put on the shiny suits. I saw the suits before the band did. Oh, wow. And I walked into the room, and he was standing in the hot pink suit. He had his chest puffed out like a peacock, as I called it, and I fucking burst out laughing. right in his face.
And how did he react to that?
Oh, Gordon and I get along really well. He just smiled. And then we did a couple pictures. The pictures, not my favorite. My flash was, I wasn't necessarily as ready as I could have been. It was sort of last minute. Ricky, security, came to get me. He's like, now. And I was in a different room, so I just took what I had, and I don't know, my flash, I think my batteries weren't charging properly, so I should have changed my batteries, but right. I don't really love using a flash to begin with, so I just turned my flash off and grabbed a couple snaps, and they're kind of gritty and high ISO, but as I always say, if you're there and you get the picture, it almost sometimes doesn't matter what it looks like. It's the memory, and it's sometimes not about the quality of the physical image. It's about the quality of everything else around it.
Right.
The reference point, if you will, to what it means to the shooter. So they mean a lot to me, even if they're not the best images. They're probably some of the more meaningful images.
Right.
And that, that's why I question myself. Like, could someone else have done better? Maybe not. But they probably wouldn't have gotten in their rooms. So There you go.
So it doesn't matter. And of all the shows and all the photos, and you talked about 23,000 you took, 20,000 your assistant took. Is there one photo that stands out to you for any reason that that's the one?
Oh, I put them in different categories. I mean, the images of Gord's hats that I did in the dressing room, I put them on the hat box. Ended up being probably some of the most special images I took ever. They made the Downey Wenjack logo based off of the hat, and I like to think it was based off of my image. There's an image of his boots. There's an image of his stage shoes on the carpet that most people haven't seen. That I think I posted it the day he died.
I saw that one, yeah.
Those are just really special. They're really powerful. There's some images of the guys on stage. There's moments that people don't see where, a hand goes onto a shoulder as a gesture of comfort or friendship, or that I've caught a bunch of those that are really special because I know the meaning underneath them, the friendship that, for example, Paul and Gord had and shared, and the things that they went through together. Those are really special. There's a couple pictures of kisses that are really special.
He was kissing everybody, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Peter Mansbridge, the guys in the band.
Yeah. Every day, before the show, he'd kiss everybody right behind stage, backstage before he went on show. And seeing those, it was just, just being there was almost overpowering at times. Like, you get a hug from Gord on that tour, and you'd remember it forever.
Wow. So you have a talk on October 26th, and you mentioned another one in December. The one in October is at I think the Robert McLaughlin Gallery. It's called Through My Lens. What can people expect to hear during that?
So the one in Oshawa, the Robert McLaughlin Gallery, is based on a talk I did at COCA. I did a keynote at the COCA conference, which is a university booking conference in April, May, I don't know, June maybe. And every time I do one of these things, I rewrite it. Kind of like a set list, but the stories, the start and the end, it's sort of like the Titanic. The start and the end are sort of the same, but the way you get there, it changes.
Right.
The different songs. So I kind of change it up, but I basically tell the story of me, starting in about grade 8 and ending, depending on what version I'm doing, ending at the Secret Path or the Kingston show. I talk about lessons I've learned, some of the experiences. I show about 75 images. I show video clips. I have props. And in Kingston, I will have live music. So for the Kingston right now, I have Paul Langlois. I have Gord Sinclair. I have Sarah Harmer, and I have Chris Coster, all participating by playing different songs that I was introduced to over the course of my career with them, whether they're Hip songs or Gord songs or Paul songs or another song. They're all sort of related. And I tell my story. And I tell it in a very different way. It's kind of more of a performance piece by the end of it. It's where I'm trying to bring it to. I did it in this way because of the challenge, really. I felt that my story lent itself to my personality and the content that I'd created over the years, which was video and images and some other things. And I wanted to tell it in a way that was different. I just didn't want to stand up and tell a story dryly. So everything's timed. There's themes. and everything's timed to the images as well. So there's probably about 130 different interactions that I incorporate, timed to words and phrases, and I do a little spoken word now, and it's just sort of developed. I'm having a prop made, I'm incorporating these things, and so we're doing it for a fundraiser in Kingston, and the notion of the experiences that I'm going through my archives, and I do it out of order, and I relive some of those experiences. And like a dream, waking from a dream, you kind of have them out of context and out of order, and you kind of remember things in bits and pieces, and you put them back in order. And as you put them in order, you remember different things, and they build on one another. And so it's this sort of dreamlike experience that I've had, and I've pulled these random pieces out, and I've reassembled them into this story. And then I'm bringing the musicians in to punctuate part of that story with music. So it'll be like a light goes down, a light comes up, there'll be a song, and I'll pretend that it never happened and it was a figment of my imagination. I'll just go on.
That sounds very cool. So I'll put a link in the show notes if people want to grab tickets for that.
The ones for the Oshawa one are available. They're free. That one's free. That one will not have music, and it'll just be me. But it's a good time.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you very much for chatting. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your stories.
You're most welcome. That was a pleasure.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks once again to David Bastedo for taking the time to speak with me. Really appreciate it. And thank you also to you for listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the show or to rate it on Apple Podcasts. It would mean a lot to me, and it will help other people find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.